Vamp, Chapter 9. They all stared at me for what felt like a minute or two. My guess is they were trying to figure out what to say, or trying to figure out if they believed me. "Bullshit," shouted Ryan. "What are you trying to pull, you crazy bitch?" "Ryan, please, no one needs you yelling right now," Roy said without breaking his eyes off me. But Ryan didn't listen, and he walked into the kitchen and said, "You say you're a vampire. Prove it. How about I take this knife and draw it across my arm? Would you like that?" He pulled an old switchblade from his pocket and lifted up his sleeve. "Please don't do that," I said as I looked at all of them. Ryan laughed and drew the knife across his skin, drawing a single red line of bright red blood. I watched the blood play plinko in between his hair follicles as it swiftly started to run down the length of his forearm. I inhaled deeply, closing my eyes, controlling myself. When I opened my eyes, they all quickly looked at each other. I knew my eyes had changed to their eerie red, and Aden confirmed it by taking a big gulp. I walked over to Ryan. I got close enough so I could see his heart pounding inside his chest. I pushed him up against the sink, leaning my body into his. I don't think he even realized he'd stopped breathing. "Are you going to believe me now, Ryan? I could suck the life out of you in less than 30 seconds. Do you understand that? Fortunately for you, AB positive is not my favorite type. Well, you can't just expect this to be easy for any of us, you know? I mean, you're telling us the fairy tales we were told as kids are true? I just don't know what to think," he said as he wiped the perspiration off his forehead. I turned around and walked over to James. "Are you okay?" "Yes, I'm fine, and I believe you." He must have seen the curiosity in my face. I hadn't expected to convince any of them that easily. Nothing else makes sense. If you were human, you wouldn't even be able to do half the jobs on this boat, let alone rescue a 200-pound man from the Bering Sea in the middle of a storm. You'd be dead right now, too. I also want you to know that I trust you. I know you wouldn't hurt any of us, and thank you so much for saving my life. I can't express my gratitude," he said as he wrapped his arms around me and gave me a hug. "You made sure I could see my family again. I just wish we'd found out sooner so we could have made you do all the heavy lifting," he said, trying to lighten the mood. I was slightly taken back by his words and action. I chuckled and gave him a kind smile as a reply. "I do have a question, though. If you exist, does that mean everything we've ever heard about exists? Werewolves, elves, fairies, gremlins, all that stuff?" asked Ethan. I looked around at all their faces. I could tell they were all holding their breath. Their heartbeats had slowed, but I could tell they were still skeptical. I looked down at the floor for a second, and then looked up at them and said, "Yeah, everything exists. Werewolves are all around us, along with fairies. Elves are real, but their numbers have seriously decreased in the last 10 years. There's demons, angels, goblins, witches, skinwalkers, succubus, shifters, and much more. They are all on this earth with us. However, some fairy tales have it all wrong, like fairies being so nice in books and movies. They are some of the most evil creatures I've ever met. They use their beauty to draw in their prey, and then they rip them apart with their hands and teeth. We're all different, and we all have different characteristics and weaknesses." Then the questions really began. I had to calm them all down and make everyone ask one at a time. They sat down and started raising their hands like they were in kindergarten. I thought it was kind of cute, so I just called on them. "So you don't have to breathe, eat, or sleep?" asked Ryan. "I don't have to breathe unless I want to smell something, but it is habit, so I just continue to do it. I don't sleep because I don't need to, and I don't have to eat, but I like to." "Can you fly?" asked Ethan. "Now don't you think if she could fly, she would have flown back up to the boat, you stupid boy?" said Roy before I could answer. I giggled a little, smiled, and said, "No, I cannot fly. I can sense the emotions of people whose blood I drink, though. Every vampire can. I can tell if a person is scared, happy, sad, angry, horny," Ryan interrupted. I rolled my eyes. "Yes, that too. And a vampire's blood can heal small wounds. Mainly just the wounds we make with our teeth. It helps with not killing people." How old are you? When did you, die? Asked Matt. I am 98 years old. I was born in 1912, and I died in 1935. I was turned 75 years ago in Romania. My father and I had traveled there to follow a tip about a vampire living under the streets, and we found him. My father died, and I was turned, I said, lifting my shirt just enough so they could see the bite mark on the bottom of my right rib. They all took a step closer and examined it. Did it hurt? Why are there no fang marks? Asked James. Yes, it was the worst pain I've ever felt in my life. And we don't have fangs. The only thing you'll notice on our teeth is that our upper and lower canine teeth are slightly more pointed than normal, I said as I opened my mouth and pointed to them. Having fangs is a fallacy. Also, we show up in mirrors and pictures. I'm not allergic to garlic. I actually quite enjoy the taste. I can also go to church and be in front of a cross, and I don't turn into ash in the sunlight. We also don't have very many emotions. I can feel excitement and anger the most, but things like love, hate, nervousness, sadness are all a little harder for us to feel. Are you thirsty right now? Your eyes are still red, asked John. Yes, I am. Well, I think in all fairness that Ryan should donate a little bit considering you were fine until he sliced his arm wide open, said Roy. I really don't think you guys want to see that, I said, looking around. Instead of finding faces of disgust and rage, I saw curiosity and wonderment. Ryan got up and walked over to me. All right, sit down on this chair, I commanded. It won't hurt, I swear. I grabbed the arm he had cut and put my fingernail in the wound that was starting to clot. Once the blood started flowing, I put my mouth on his arm and started drinking. As soon as his blood hit my mouth, I knew he wasn't scared. He felt guilty, curious, and excited. It doesn't hurt at all, Ryan said as I continued to feed. It feels like my arm went to sleep. That's it, he said, amazed. When I finished, I turned back to everyone and asked, Is this why you move so often? Asked Aden. I try to keep on the moves, see different places, meet different people. So did you ever go back to your family after you returned, or did you just abandon them? I paused. No, I didn't want to risk killing them myself. I was a young vampire, and I couldn't control my need to feed right away. Plus, I was stuck in Romania for years. I always wanted to go back, but after so many years, well, no one was there to go back to, I said, hurt. Aden was staring at the floor, refusing to make eye contact with me now. I wanted to scream at him, shake him, make him look at me. However, my thoughts were interrupted by Matt with another question. So where have you all lived? Well, before I was turned, I lived in Boston. Afterwards, I lived in Romania, Italy, Spain, France, Germany, Egypt, Ireland, and all over the United States. Silence fell over the group. They were all mentally processing. Thankfully, Roy took control of the situation. It's getting late, everyone. We have had enough excitement for a while. We will pull in the rest of the pots tomorrow. The crowd will be fine. They all agreed and got up. Some gave me a hug, a few patted me on the back, except for Aden, who went right upstairs. Roy was the last one to come over to me, and he wrapped his arms around me and said, I want to thank you for sharing the truth with us. We all knew there was something different about you, but we liked you nonetheless. I promise you, nothing will change, and don't worry, your secret's safe with us. Aden's pissed, I said. He'll get over it. Give him a few minutes, then go talk to him. He cares about you too much to change the way he feels about you. Then Roy was off to get ready for some sleep. I sat there thinking about Roy's words. He cares about you too much. I sat downstairs, thinking about everything that had just happened. All of a sudden, I remembered Aden had called me baby when we first got downstairs, when he was trying to get me dry. I felt my stomach do flip-flops. Could he really care about me like that? I asked myself. I decided that he had had enough time to think, so I picked myself up out of my chair, put some clean clothes on, and got up the courage to go and talk to Aden. While everyone slept, I went up to the captain's post. I opened the door and walked up the stairs. He was sitting in his chair, looking out at the ocean with a cup of coffee in his hands. How are you? I asked. Fine. I'm a woman, Aden. I know what fine means. Will you please talk to me? I have no idea what's going on in your head. I said as I walked up and stood behind his chair. He spun around and looked at me. Gretchen, I have no idea what's going on in my head. I don't know what to think anymore. I'm confused. I thought I knew who you were. I loved that you were so real and down to earth and ready to try anything. Now, what I thought was real isn't real at all, and it turns out you're something that I thought was totally unreal, and I'm having a hard time believing this is all real, he said while moving his hands around in front of him. It took me a minute to map out everything he'd said. I think he was even a little confused by his own statement, because after it came out of his mouth, he set his coffee down and rubbed his temples with his fingers. It's still me. I'm still the same girl I was before you knew the truth. I don't really know what you want me to say or do. I only keep it a secret because the world isn't ready to know about everything that's out there. Some people still can't get over the color of another's skin. You weren't telling me the whole truth either. I'm sorry, but it's not something I go around screaming at the top of my lungs. He sat there looking at his hands in his lap. The thing is, I feel a little bit like a crazy person. I mean, sure, we've all heard the stories of mythical creatures, but you never think that you'll really wind up in that predicament. He stood up and looked down at me. I trust you. I know you would never hurt us. If you were going to hurt us, you would have done it already. It's just a little overwhelming, all this information. That's all. And the weirdest part of it all is that I still want to protect you. You're everything I've ever wanted and more. I'm falling for you. I've been falling for you since the day you showed up on my boat. You are all I think about. When I saw you jump over to get James, my heart stopped. I didn't know what I would have done if I had lost you. His hands had been in his pockets up until this point. He took his right hand out and cautiously brushed the side of my cheek, and then pushed my hair behind my ear. Aden, But I was at a loss for words. I hadn't expected him to be so forward about his feelings. His hands moved up to the sides of my face, and he pulled me up to his lips. The feeling was intense. I moved my hands around his neck and pulled myself closer to him. It was a very passionate kiss, full of fire and lust. I didn't even realize that he had pushed me against the wall until his lips left mine and found my neck. I thought about going all the way right then and there, and I could tell he felt the same way. But I didn't want this to go too fast. If we were going to do this, I wanted to do it right. Aden, we need to stop. He looked down at me with a mix of confusion and concern. There's a better time and place for this. Many, actually, that don't include your crew right below us. I like you. I'm drawn to you. I actually want to have a real relationship for once in my life. That's kind of a big deal for me, and I just want to do it right. He smirked at my comment about the guys below us, but ultimately agreed. Of course, I agree with you 100%, and I want this to work, he said as he lowered his lips to mine for one more tender kiss. When I heard someone coming up the stairs, I pulled away from him. I didn't know if the other men knew how we both felt, so I didn't want to make an embarrassing or awkward moment out of being caught in each other's arms. It was Roy. Glad to see the two of you are talking. Just thought I would check on you two and make sure no one was dead up here, he said with a dry laugh. Too soon? He counted back at our bewildered and yet amused faces. No, everything's good, Pop. Aden looked back at me, pulled me close, and wrapped his arms around me. Mine instinctually slipped around his waist. Ah, I see. Well, good. I won't butt in. Just wanted to drop off some extra bandages and say goodnight. Aden shook his head and sighed. Okay, night, Dad. Just before Roy's head disappeared below the railing, he stopped and looked back at us. I'm glad you finally grew a pair, boy. You don't let a girl like that get away. I'd like it if she stuck around forever. He winked at me and continued down the stairs, laughing at his originally created dad jokes. Aden and I snuggled in his post the rest of the night. The storm outside had passed as well, almost a figurative metaphor for our own situation, because now, just like the sea, we were calm and merrily floating along.